And Bartuska, who he's tried to introduce already, is Deputy Undersecretary at USDA for Research, Education, and Economics. If there's anything connected, she's got all three agenda. But she's been with Forest Service for in a number of ways. She's also been a part of the Nature Conservancy, which many in this room know quite a bit about, but has really been in the heartstone of in this ecological discussion about how we move forward. So, Ann, it's all yours.
Thank you. Can I black it out until I'm ready for it? I'm not going to start with that.
Okay.
You do the Control V? No.
Okay. I will try.
Okay.
Okay. We'll just shrink it. Okay.
I had a story
go.
before that slide, so I was waiting. I'm going to hold off on that one.
Okay.
If you get it teed up.
Yeah. I'll just do that one, and then you can do your story. Oops. Oh, go away. Okay.
And then I just go down?
I'll
Okay, all right, great. Sorry, small technical detail there. One of the reasons I wanted to go last was I'm going to try to make the case for what you just heard is the science that informs policy. What I'm going to talk about is the policy, hopefully, that comes from that science. And so I'm going to be really light on any facts. There'll be a few in there. But it's really how we build from all of this. And I'm going to say, I would say that with some degree of credibility, because at USDA, we started doing climate change research in agricultural and forested systems in 1989 as a direct result of the termination of the National Acid Precipitation Assessment Program, which is where I cut my teeth on science management. And so we have the data, we have the information, and I think what we've been trying to do is build that into the processes that we use then to make decisions about climate change and other factors within the agricultural and forestry sector. But what I first want to do is start with, because the title of this is Global Climate Ecosystem Services and Biological Sequestration. And so I really want to start with the ecosystem services piece because it's something that I have been really astounded in some ways that we took that on as a department fairly aggressively and fairly early on because of the 2008 Farm Bill. That Farm Bill established an Office of Environmental Markets, and the reason for that was because we knew that if we were going to be able to enable landowners to get incentivized around carbon or water or nutrients or biodiversity, they had to have a system in place to go into a marketplace. So this is the translation of ecosystem services into a market, values for those into a marketplace. And so the whole reason for the Office of Environmental Markets was to start creating standards, creating guidelines for actually establishing markets, creating systems for monitoring and measuring those, that whatever that variable is. So again, if you enter a market, there's a fair way of trading and being able to manage that. We built in a governance structure that would be reflecting all of the different programs at USDA, and for those of you who don't know, we have 16 agencies, so it's a really diverse portfolio. And, but it really was to be much more deliberate about if you were able to give a farmer the opportunity to trade carbon credits, because right around 2008, 2009, we actually thought we might have a climate bill with carbon credits, there would be a basis for that. And the scientific basis for that has been established, slowly being confirmed and built upon, and I really have to commend EPA for the amount of work they've done on the whole area of the science around ecosystem services. So I want to mention that because that is the governance structure by which one can take a science and then move it into a very deliberate set of policy actions and build it into programs, which is the way we govern. And so part of what my connection on that ecosystem services piece is how do you make this real in terms of the marketplace? More generally and in a more inclusive way, fairly recently, I think it was the middle of last year, actually it was October of last year, the White House promulgated a guidance to all of us, which was called Incorporating Ecosystem Services into Federal Decision Making. Probably most of you don't even know that happened, because actually what we have not done is translated that to actions and strategic direction and all that stuff that you need to move government forward. But it was really actually a game changer because it's forcing us to codify what are those ecosystem services that we value and how would we build them into the planning, whether it be strategic planning or in the case, for example, the Forest Service is an early adopter because they're building it into their forest planning rule. And so as a national forest plans for the next 15, 20 years, they are trying to capture what ecosystem services in that national forest should be identified. They're not taking it to a market, but the idea of being able to describe that and then measure it over time. So just as we have been measuring how many visitor days we get per year, now we may be able to capture the water ecosystem service that is being produced by having an intact forest. And that is the type of transition going from that science to practice that I think is we're really taking advantage of. And again, the reason I wanted to mention ecosystem services is because when you start talking about or responding to climate change, whether it be adaptation or mitigation, building in that ecosystem service as part of it's either an additional effect of that or it's actually a very deliberate incorporation of the effect of the particular action. And so that has become part of this twofer that you get. As you take an action around responding to global change, what is the ecosystem service value that you're capturing as part of that action? Okay, now I'm ready. So we've actually taken two approaches. Can you hear me without the mic back there? Okay. That we've sort of we have taken two approaches to responding to climate change. One that actually every agency has pretty much done this. One is an adaptation approach, and this really has been built on the research that we've been doing over the last couple decades. And it's taking advantage of things like our national germplasm collection, where we can be identifying which particular germplasm of major agricultural crops are drought tolerant or heat tolerant, and be able to parse out as we have changing climatic variability, being able to provide a producer this particular germplasm material. And we're actually able to do that for quite a few of our important crops. We've also been improving crop production, improving predictions around crop production on different climatic scenarios, especially under extreme events, which is one area that we are particularly concerned about as we find too much water, too little water, and just the stochastic variability of temperature regimes in unpredictable ways that most farmers expect certain patterns over time. So we have a very, very significant adaptation strategy, but what I wanted to bring here, because I think it ties in with what we've just heard the last two presentations, is the mitigation approach. In order to respond to a mitigation strategy, we've developed what's called the building blocks for climate smart agriculture and forestry, and I talk a little bit about that. And it captures some of the approaches that we have been learning over time from the type of work that you've just heard about. And that's being able to respond to these changes, to building in resiliency and some predictability, even if it's predictability with range of uncertainty, at least giving some guidance to those who have to make decisions. It also would be to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to increase sequestration, and to add to that the renewable energy piece, because that is still a very important portfolio within our overall approach. Some of the principles of the building blocks I'm showing there, but I guess one of the ones that is particularly important to USDA as we operate is voluntary practices. And this is something that we take great pride in. It's because of our voluntary approach that we have access to so many farmers and ranchers and foresters who in fact don't really like the regulatory agencies. That may be new to some of you. But it gives us an access and an ability to change behaviors because of encouraging those voluntary practices, even as we tweak our programs to be able to deliver on the approaches that we're trying to promote. And that really has become what the building blocks have done, is if you look at across all of those 16 agencies, all the different programs we have to reach rural producers, to forest landowners, to urban foresters. How do we build upon all of that in order to really move the needle in understanding and being able to address changes in greenhouse gas emissions as well as in sequestration? And so what we've done is identified, and this is the policy piece, these 10 building blocks, and you probably cannot see it in the back row, and I hate saying that in presentations, but this is available, and I can get it to everyone. And these are the 10 areas where we feel we can make measurable change, and that by 2025 have an annual reduction or abatements of greenhouse gases of 120 million tons. And the calculus has been done. The proof will be in the measuring and monitoring. But what we've identified here are in these 10 building blocks, and I'll just mention them so that those of you who can't see so clearly. One is soil health. This is taking several of our programs, especially NRCS and the CRP program, and promoting soil conservation practices, increasing organic matter and reducing emissions from soils. So you have that benefit. Nitrogen stewardship, being able to reduce nitrous oxide emissions and provide cost savings by doing so. And there are several practices within agriculture that you can get a very direct reduction in nitrous oxide emissions by changing practices. Livestock partnerships. This is probably one of the real focal points for some areas of how much methane and other gases are produced through livestock operations. So what can we do to reduce that? Anaerobic digesters is a major approach to that. But I have to tell you, the dairy industry's really taken to heart to close their own system. Water conservation practices, manure management, reducing emissions through through an approach through using life cycle analysis that helps build sustainability into their practices. And if you want to look at leaders in the different fields, the dairy folks have really taken that on in a big way. Conservation of sensitive lands, and enrolling more acres, and the number is 400,000 for those of you who can't see, in the Conservation Reserve Program, deliberately choosing areas where you can get high greenhouse gas benefits. So being targeted with landowners where that particular land actually gives you greater benefit. And some of that ties to wetlands and wetland mitigation management as part of the approach. Grazing and pasture lands is another building block where the grazing management plans would add additional 9 million acres, and those grazing plans actually are designed to continue to improve or reduce the stresses on soil health, soil carbon, as well as reducing or part of the manure management. Private forest growth and retention, taking directly off some of the numbers we have about the value of forests and reforestation to protect additional million acres of these working landscapes. Stewardship of federal forests and increasing the reforestation of our national forest lands. Promotion of wood products. And this is where, and this is a little controversial, and I think this is where life cycle assessments are really critical, is how much carbon can you capture in wooden buildings so that you actually are coupling the removal of trees and harvesting of trees into wood buildings and putting them into longer term carbon storage. And what is the life cycle of that? What is the net benefit? And some of our folks have done the analysis that suggests that this is still a very positive approach. Urban forests, and really recognizing that urban lands do have a role in greenhouse gas emissions and carbon sequestration, and to be much more deliberate about that. And then lastly, addressing energy generation and efficiencies and promoting renewable energy technologies. And the one thing I just want to bring in here is all of those little red ESs, that's ecosystem service. This is the twofer part of it, is as we're improving soil health and capturing soil carbon and increasing soil organic matter, we're also improving the microbiome, and the productivity of that land increases. And to be able to couple these aspects is something that I think we can be and are being very deliberate about. And if we really had a carbon marketplace, an agriculture producer who was improving soil health would get added value for that land and would get a credit not only from the production of the agricultural product, but we get the benefit of the carbon that they're keeping in the soil or increasing in the soil through some of their practices. And so the idea of having these building blocks, thinking about not only greenhouse gas emission management, but also bringing some of the ecosystem services to working lands, to me is a really integrated approach. And again, I think it's deliberately built upon the science that we have been generating. And with that, turn it.
As always, first class.